Bismillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah, amma ba'd, my dear brothers and sisters in Islam. Assalamu Alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So today I have a story. The story is from Islamic / Arab history. There is no narration to it. It's just a story. It's not a hadith. So there is no narration, goes before that. The story, there is something to learn from it. It's enjoyable, at least in my opinion, and slightly funny. So here it goes. When we say A'rabi, which is one, this is a man who lives in the desert. It's not a bad thing to call somebody A'rabi. If he lives in the desert, he is an A'rabi. Plural of it is A'rab, more than two or more. In this case, we have an A'rabi who's a righteous man, and he has 3 boys. He named the first one Abdullah, he named the second one Abdullah, and then the third one, he named him Abdullah. Why? Allah knows best, but that's his choice. He then was on his deathbed. Then he said, Abdullah inherits, Abdullah does not inherit, Abdullah inherits. He then died. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. So they're looking at each other like, which one of us is the Abdullah who's not going to inherit? And they couldn't agree, of course. They decided the next morning to go and see the judge and let him figure this out. They pack and leave because court is in town and they're in the desert, away from the town. On their way to town, they meet a man, and he was asking them, have you seen my camel? They're like, no, we have not seen your camel. And then as he was leaving, one of them said, hey, come back here. He came back. One of them said, is your camel missing an eye? He said, yes. So, they must have seen it. The second one said, is your camel missing a tail? The tail of it is not gone. Like, yes. And then the third one said, is your camel leaning on one side when it's walking? He said, yes. Have you seen it? They're like, no, we have not seen your camel. He's like, you know what? You stole my camel and you're messing with me. I'm taking you to the judge. They're like, don't bother yourself. We are actually going there. Let's go. They get to the judge, and the judge, of course, starts with the man's camel, the lost camel. What's your story? He said, Your Honor, these people stole my camel and they're denying. He's like, and how did you know that they stole your camel? He said, this man knows that my camel is missing an eye. This man knows that my camel is missing its tail. And this man knows that my camel leans on one side when it's walking. Yet they're denying that they've seen it. So he asked the first one, how did you know it's missing an eye? He said, I looked at the area where the camel was missing or lost, and I noticed that grass been eating on one side and the other side not. So I figured this camel has one eye, so he's eating the grass where he can see and not the other side. Okay. What about you? How did you know that the camel is missing its tail? He said the camel, when it's walking on the sand and dropping its dung, uses its tail to spread it left and right. But when I looked in that area, I saw the dung of the camel lined up, in small, piles like that. So I figured it doesn't have a tail. All right. What about you? How did you know that the camel is leaning on one side? He said, that's easy. I looked at the footsteps of the camel and I saw that one side is much deeper than the other side. So I concluded that the camel has, it's leaning on one side when it's walking. So the judge looks at the man. He said, it doesn't look like they stole your camel. Go look for whoever stole your camel and come back to me. And then he said, okay, you guys have a case? They're like, oh, yeah, we have a case. Forget about this man and his camel. We have a much more complicated case. What's your case? So they told him. Their father named them all Abdullah. And then on his deathbed, he said Abdullah inherits. Abdullah does not inherit. Abdullah inherits. And we don't know which one of us is Abdullah who will not inherit. So we need your help. So the judge was scratching his head like, how am I going to figure this out? So he said, you know what? You stay with me today as my guests. And we will deal with your case tomorrow morning. Okay. They take them to the guest room. And as soon as they close the door, they're like, be careful. We are being watched. Somebody's spying on us. All right. A few minutes later, somebody opens the door, brings the food, meat, and bread. One of them was about to eat. The other one said, nope, be careful. Don't eat. Why not? He said, this is a dog meat. So he stayed away from it. A'udhu billah. The third one looked at the bread and he said, this bread was baked by a woman who is 9 months pregnant. Talk about specialty. Anyways, the third one dropped a big one. He said this judge is a child of wedlock. Waliyadu billah. Like, man, be careful. The next morning, of course, the judge has the report of what they said there. He said, which one of you said that the meat that was served is a dog meat? All right, how did you know? He said the lamb and cow and ma'iz or goat meat, you see the bone, then the meat, and then the fat. But animals like wolves and dogs and lions and all that, they have bone, fat, and then meat, which is the muscle, which is why they're strong and fast and all. And that's how I recognize this meat is a dog meat. It's not lamb. He's like, okay, call the cook. They called him. He's like, what did you cook for these people yesterday? He said, Your Honor, he told me to make dinner for them and it was late already, and the sheep didn't show up, has not show up from the pasture yet, and I was in a hurry. I was like, those Arab didn't know any better. I grabbed the dog, slaughtered it, and cooked it for them. Okay, leave. The next one. How did you know that the bread was baked by a woman who was 9 months? He said the bread, when it's in the oven, the side that's closer to the fire rises. So somebody has to rotate the loaf of bread so the other side also rises. But I noticed all the bread that we got was risen from one side and the other side is completely flat. That's because the pregnant woman, it's really hard for her to do the action of rotating the loaf of bread. Okay. And then he said, and why would you say about me that I'm a child of wedlock? He said, there is no man from Arab and Muslim who would spy on his guests unless he's a child of a wedlock. So the judge, before he loses his cool, he stepped away. He went and asked his mom. And then she actually confessed to him that he's a child of wedlock. He came back. He's like, all right. So I have my judgment. All right. Which one of you said that the meat is a dog meat? Me. you inherit. Second one, which one of you said the woman who baked the bread is pregnant in 9 months? Me, you inherit. And he said, as for you, you do not inherit. He's like, why, Your Honor? He said, only a child of wedlock would recognize another child of wedlock. That's why you do not inherit. So they left court. They went to their mom and asked her, like, who's this child? He's like, fine, I'll tell you. Your father found him at the masjid after Fajr, and he was a baby. So I brought him to me. We named him Abdullah and we raised him. So it turned out that child is really a child of wedlock. The moral of the story, they say bird of feather flock together, and that's why the judge recognized the one who's also a child of wedlock. هذا وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.